All right, we are in our series, Following Jesus. Normally it's book by book, verse by verse. Every once in a while I'll take a little detour to hit some key topics and do like a little short series. This particular one is Following Jesus. Basically like discipleship 101 kind of type thing. Some of these topics we actually go through in our discipling courses that we're in the middle of right now. And just to really dig in, press in to following Jesus. And so we are, so far we've covered the Bible, what it is, how to read it, those kinds of things. The Bible, we've covered prayer, we've covered fellowship. Elder Matthew crushed it last week, man, bringing the word. It's a blessing, brother, thank you. And today we're going to talk about stewardship. Stewardship. And then, by the way, after, if you're like, oh man, topical stuff, well, there's a lot of good topics, man. And so, I felt led by the Spirit to be able to hit these, compile this together, and hit this for everybody. It's always good reminders for the basics as well. And then, of course, after this, we'll be going back into a book and dive in. So, now in case you didn't know, our nation has some debt. I didn't know if you knew this. That's the number as of Wednesday afternoon when I completed these slides, right? 35 trillion, by the way, if you're trying to count those zeros, are like, what the? By the way, a trillion is a million millions. So if you picture millions, you're like, oh man, millions a lot. It's a million millions. Holy cow. We've got some debt. Can we agree on that? Yeah. It's almost like, what do we even do with this, right? Look at this, though. That's our nation. Look at this. This came from Ramsey. Anybody follow Dave Ramsey? He's got some great resources online. Free stuff, too, man. I subscribe to his podcast. He's got a lot of good clips in there. There's a lot you can glean little tips and strategies and stuff like that, principles and stuff. Hey, good morning. So look at this, though. Credit card debt. Average credit card debt, 20 grand per household, nearly, right? These are average stats as of I forget what year. This is like at the end of last year or something like that. Then you've got just debt as a whole. Look at that average household debt, 180 grand, right? So you've got the national debt at $35 trillion. You've got the average household debt at around in the U.S. at 180 grand. We have a lot of debt. There's a lot of owing. And there's a weight that comes with this. For those that have this weight, it can break people. It can break people emotionally, mentally. It can strain relationships hardcore. And they say that the average when there's a marriage issues, like the majority of them, they're money issues, but really it's the strain that's put on them that's been put on these relationships because it weighs on you, and it can weigh on you when you wake up and during the day and at night and all these different things. And so what we want to talk about today is the Jesus follower. The person who follows Jesus is a man and a woman, children who steward well. Steward well. So we're going to talk about finances. We're going to talk about not just that, though, because it's stewardship in the broad sense. All we have is the Lord's. So how are we stewarding it? Are we stewarding well? And so what is biblical stewardship? We'll get into that. That's kind of what I was just sharing there. Psalm 24:1. The earth is the Lord's and all its fullness, the world and those who dwell therein. That tells me that how much of it's His. All, right? Oh, you could say all the earth is the Lord's, all its fullness, the world and those who dwell within, right? That means it's all His. Everything belongs to God. That is a key concept, church. We can go, hey, that's the Lord's, right? How about this, too, for families? Our kids are the Lord's, right? Our marriage is the Lord's. Our job is the Lord's. Our car, our home, right? our stuff. It's his. And there's a mental shift, a click that can happen there where we go, you know what? God's good. He's got this. I love you, Lord. Right? Huge. Everything belongs to God. Also, this is biblical stewardship. Biblical stewardship. Look at this. 1 Peter 4, 9 to 10. Be what? What's it say? Hospitable. Be hospitable to one another without grumbling. That's the part I have a hard time with. You know, it's like, oh, okay. Well, that was grumbling. It's like my heart, you know. Be hospitable to one another without grumbling. As each one has received a gift, minister it to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. So to be hospitable to each other, right? We've received it. Well, you received it. Did you go create it? No, you received it. So if you receive it, so freely give, right? The problem is we go, well, I went to work, and I did that enough, and I got that paycheck, or it shows up in your bank account. Well, that's my money. You know, I went and bought that thing. Man, who gave you the ability to do that? Right? Remember you prayed about getting that job, and he helped you get that job. Remember when you prayed for strength because your boss was a pain in the butt? Yeah, he gave you that strength. So who gave you so where did it come from, right? So making sure that we don't grumble, making sure that we're hospitable to one another. I'll be honest, this is something that the Lord has been working in me more recently, in the last year or two, to be more just freely giving, you know, to one another. God entrusts, that's what I'm saying. First point there on the top, everything belongs to God. Next, these are biblical principles for stewardship. God entrusts things to us. That means that what you have, he's entrusted you with that. That's stewardship. Like, hey, I'm the boss. I'm going to give this to you, and I want you to use this for the kingdom. Oh, right? Another mental shift there. Here's another one. We then have a responsibility to steward wisely. So we're all stewards. If you're on Team Jesus, you are stewarding the things that you have. Okay? Your brain, your body, your words, your possessions, your finances, all of it. This is a big umbrella stewardship, right? Therefore, we should do it wisely. We should steward wisely. Look at Matthew 25. Go there now in the Word. This is one of the ones that's too much to put on the screen. If you need a Bible, they are on the end of each row. So you can just look under your chair and you will get one. If you see somebody looking, pass them one. Just don't throw it at them. All right, Matthew 25, verse 14. Jesus tells this parable to illustrate the concept of what a good and wise steward looks like. Okay, so it makes sense for us if we're going, hey, what's biblical stewardship? Let's go to the source, King Jesus, because he has a story to tell to illustrate the point. Verse 14 of Matthew 25 says this, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them." Pause. So there's a guy, he's going to take off for a while. He's going to come back. For those connecting the dots here. The boss man's going to go away for a while and he's going to return. He's going to have a second coming, if you will. Okay? And he says he's delivering his goods to them. So all of his things are now theirs. And he's kind of divvied them up. Okay? That's what's happening. To one he gave 5 talents. Now, this is not a talent like a skill. This is a quantity of money or resources, we'll say, okay? A talent is typically a weight measurement of money, you know. And so, just in biblical times. So, let's say this is resources, okay? 5 units, we'll say. How about that? To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, another 1. To each according to his own ability, and immediately he went on a journey. So he gives these people these things based on what they can handle. Did you get that? according to his own ability. God will never give you something and require of you something that he doesn't already know you can handle. So this guy, he's wheeling and dealing, and he's making, he's investing or whatever he's doing, trading, I don't know. But he's using it wisely and makes two. Now, but look at this, verse 18. But he who had received 1 talent, he goes out into a field, he dug in the ground, and buried the talent. Covered it up. He hid the Lord's money. Verse 19. After a long time, the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. So after a while, the Lord came back. So he who had received 5 talents came to the Lord, and he brought 5 more, saying, "Hey, Lord, you delivered to me the 5. Look, I've gained 5 more talents besides them. I used what you gave me. And there's more for the kingdom." Cool. And the Lord said to him, "Well done, faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord." And they high-fived, they chest bumped, right? There was pyrotechnics. Woo! Enter into the joy of your Lord. That's me adding it, by the way. That's not in the Word. That's how I picture it, right? Verse 22. He who had received 2 talents came and said, "Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Look, I gained 2 more talents besides them. I used what you gave me according to my ability, and I did it well. And look at this. It's for you, Lord." Right? You see the heart? Do you see the heart? And his Lord said to him, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful." You as a hard man, a stern man, reaping where you've not sown, gathering where you've not scattered. He's saying, you take where you didn't invest. He's getting it's a little edgy here, isn't it? It's like, almost like a wagging the finger at boss man, You gather where you didn't work. You're taking when you didn't invest. Interesting. But he says here, verse 25, "I was afraid, and I went and I hid your talent in the ground, and look, here it is." And I went and I hid your talent in the ground, and there you have what's yours. Here it is. And I went and I... But his Lord answered and said to him, "You wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap," quote unquote, "you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have at least deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back my own, at least with interest. You know what? Take this talent from him, give it to him who had the 10. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Does God take stewardship seriously? He sure does. We read that last verse, and it's like, oh, dang. We just completed Revelation, right? And it talks about the everlasting lake of fire, and that sure sounds a lot like it, doesn't it? I would put it that in this parable, this is a parable, that this depiction of this character in this parable probably is a poser Christian. Lord, Lord, if you will, for those that know that verse, right? Lord, Lord, I worked in your name. It's like, you didn't know me. This guy doesn't know Jesus. I knew you were a hard man. Is Jesus a hard man? No, man. He's got grace and love and mercy. And sure, there's times when he might, spank us, but it's always to bring us back to a place of well-being and abundance. I hid it. I know you gave it to me. I just kept it. Still have it. I kept it. Here you go. Let's apply that to us now. If we're supposed to steward wisely, what does this tell us? According to your ability, what God has given you, what He has entrusted into you. First off, it's all His. He's entrusted it to you. You have a responsibility to steward wisely all your stuff. Anything you can really think of practically in your mind, use it for Him. Use it for Him. Use it for the kingdom. Right? For one another, for the church, for the not saved, to worship Him, whatever that is. Use it. Be alive with this. Don't just, if you have a talent and ability and a skill and you're not using it, I would say warning. Correct? Based on this, warning. Now that doesn't mean you're not saved. I'm not saying that. Because there's a lot of great believers, great Jesus followers who just kind of, life gets busy. Right? Doesn't life get busy and we're just doing, we're spinning our wheels, or life has pain. And we just it's like we take that skill or that ability and just put it away in the box. Maybe one day. I encourage you, get those things out. Get involved. We talked about serving, right? Start. Just go. Worship the Lord through those things. That's the wise steward. The wise steward. We want to be wise. And kids, youth, it starts at your age, man. What do you have? I don't have anything. Yes, you do. And we're going to uncover what we have at our disposal. It starts now. Using what you have for the Lord. If you can get that concept, adults, if we could have that concept when we were 10, 11, 12, 15, would we be different today? Adults? Yeah. So kids, stew it. Stew it, man. All right. In a nutshell, be others-centered, not self-centered. Would you say that we live in a world where there's a lot of self-centeredness? Okay, thank you. Hello? Are we in a world that is absorbed with selfies? Right? Social media is just it's just inundated. Now, don't get me wrong. I was scrolling through with my oldest and my wife, and we were looking at funny animal videos. Just watching videos, man, just laughing, So there's a place for it. But when it becomes very self-absorbed, and now we live our life, and it's like, I don't like this, and so we get whiny, or I need more of this. It's all about us. And what we have or what we don't have, and what we think we need, and what we don't need, and what I want and what I don't want. And and it's not, part of it's media. Part of it's marketing. Because it's natural for us to become self-absorbed. It's natural for us to go back to what our flesh wants. Even if it's not even a bad thing. It's just what we want. It's natural for us to take care of self. It's unnatural to take care of other people. So when Jesus says, hey, love your enemies, right? Whoa! Mind-blowing, right? So we're called to be so others-centered, so others-focused, not self-centered. Look at this verse here, Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit. If you look up the word nothing, it means actually nothing. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, that's humility. In lowliness of mind, let us esteem others better than himself. Let each of you look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interests of others. That's Philippians 2, verses 3 to 4. Man, you can't escape that. Isn't that what Jesus did? Jesus lived this, right? He lived this. He lived for others. And that's what God is calling us to be doing. It takes some humility. It takes some self-sacrifice, esteeming others, raising them up, building up others, investing in others, helping, encouraging, praying for, asking, how about that? How can I pray for you? Hey, how are you doing? How is this? Esteeming others better than himself. Looking out for their interests, not just your own. And that's a hallmark of a Jesus follower. By the way, if you have any questions, friendly reminder, you can text those in. Numbers at the bottom. Now, we've talked about what biblical stewardship is. Okay? Other-centered. It's all God's. He's entrusted it to us. Right? So now what? What are we talking about? Basically, I boiled it down to 3 areas that I see. There's 3 general areas, 3 buckets of resources, 3 buckets of stewardship that we have. Our resources, our abilities, and then our gifts. Resources, which is like our possessions, the physical stuff, possessions and money, okay? So the material things. Abilities, like our talents, our skills, right? And then gifts, so more of a spiritual gifts I'm referencing there, okay? So we're going to unpack those 3 things. And we're going to start with the possessions first. So that point there, let's break this down here. Stewarding our possessions well, our possession resources, if you will. Now, remembering where we started. Everything's the Lord's, right? Everything's the Lord. We say, my car, but we say, my house. We say, my money. Yes. But consider your possessions as being entrusted to you. And we talked about that. If they've been entrusted with you, how might you use them differently? You know, you don't have to answer that out loud necessarily right now. But think about it in your mind. How would you use that differently if you just every day thought, hey, you know what? This isn't mine, it's the Lord's. This isn't mine, this is the Lord's. We talked about family too. How would we do our marriages differently? How would we do our parenting differently? How would we do church differently? Right? Stewarding possession resources well. Now, stewarding money resources. This is this part where everybody gets uncomfortable. Guess what? This is not comfortable for me. Okay? It is what it is. It's in the Word. I'm going to teach it. Malachi 3:10 says, bring your tithes. See, this is money resources. Stewardship is broader than this. We've talked about this. Okay? But this is specifically dollars. Bring your tithes, which means 10%. Tithe means tenth, by the way. That's the word. Tenth. Bring your tenths into the storehouse. Malachi 3:10. The storehouse was the place of worship. The temple at that time. Bring your tithes into the storehouse. Deuteronomy 14:22. You shall truly tithe, 10%, of the increase of your grain that the field produces year by year. So biblical times, they would tithe they would give their 10% to the church, as using our terms. And then now I've had some people go, well, tithing, that's an Old Testament thing. It is. It's clearly in the Old Testament. It's also a New Testament thing, for those that don't know. Matthew 23:23. Jesus has been talking to the Pharisees, and he says, hey, you guys' heart's way far from me. You guys are exceedingly religious, but you're missing the heart. And then part of that section that he's talking about there in Matthew 23, he says this, you pay tithe, 10%, you pay the 10% of mint and anise and cumin, those are herbs. It's like if you had a little jar, and you've got, cumin is like these little seeds, these little round seeds. It's like, so they're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, Lord. What? It's like, oh my gosh, you guys are like getting really down to it. But you've neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice, mercy, faith. Right? These things you ought to have done, meaning the tithing. You ought to have done those without leaving the others, the heart issue, undone. So Jesus is going, hey, yes, the giving, that's a good thing, but you're missing the heart. We'll come back to the heart here in just a minute, though. But there's a New Testament reference there. It's the same. God's the same Old Testament, New Testament. And now here's the thing. Tithing's not the goal, guys. Giving at 10%, it's not like, oh, I give 10%. Oh, I'm super Christian. Okay. Tithing is not the goal. It's meant to be the starting point. It's meant to be the starting point. When it comes to stewarding your resources, God is trying to create in us a giving heart. And He knows that what you do with your money, there your heart goes. It's natural. And so He wants to say, hey, will you be kingdom-minded with your purchases? Will you be kingdom-minded with what you buy, what you don't buy? He wants us to grow. 2 Corinthians 9, 2 Corinthians 9, 6, and 7. Paul requested a special offering from a church in Corinth. You guys know Corinth? That's the 1st and 2 Corinthians. We have that in the Bible, right? So it was a church at Corinth. And he requested a special offering. And he says, hey, I'm going to be coming. Have it ready. He's being direct about it. And then he says this, after he says, hey, have it ready. And so he's kind of letting him know. He goes, by the way, he who sows sparingly, he's using who gives sparingly, sows sparingly, will also reap sparingly. He who sows bountifully will also reap or gather bountifully. So let each one give as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or out of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. Now, first point is he's not talking about the tithe. This is a special offering. Second thing is, He wants to have us have a cheerful heart. Now, you could say, well, I'm not cheerful, so I won't give. I'm out. That's my clause. I'm out. Can't do it cheerfully, so I'm not doing it. Okay, what are you doing to work on that heart? Why are you having that? Why are you having a closed fist? By the way, the more you hang on to it, man, I tell you, the less you have hands open. I've seen it. I've experienced it. And that's why Paul is saying, hey, if you sow sparingly, then you will reap sparingly. If you sow bountifully, then you will reap bountifully. The goal is that we would have joy in giving. Understanding that it's all from Him anyway. It's all from Him anyway, guys. And I said this before. Matthew, I think you even mentioned it last week, if I remember correctly. But God doesn't need your money. This is not yes, it provides for the church, right? Like lights in the place and the AC, all this stuff, right? But the church doesn't need your money either. It's not about that. It's not like God's going, oh man, I got to pay the bills. Oh, I'm going to go into debt. The Lord's not worried about this at all. But why does He create this then? So then, right? Doesn't that kind of beg the question? Then why does He create this concept? Why did He create giving? Speaking of money specifically on this one, why did He do it? Because He knows that that's a pathway to our heart, and He wants to have us be givers, not just takers, but givers, and not just givers, but cheerful givers. To grow in our ability to be givers, and that's partaking in the kingdom and investing in the kingdom, investing in others, and all kinds of good stuff. He wants to do that. So He creates this structure, this tenth, as a starting point, a benchmark, giving us something to kind of frame it all, and then goes from there. Cool. Makes sense to me, And when you practice this, when you put this into play, put this into practice, and you grow in this area, because it takes time to grow into this, it becomes fun. It becomes fun. Now I'm gonna tell you something. I'm gonna be transparent again. I've talked to you guys in the past about like when my wife and I decided, hey, we're going to tithe, right? We had this conversation. It was a Christian discipleship thing, and I got back out and got in our car, and I'm like, dude, like that's a chunk of change. Like that's next to rent. Like that's our biggest thing. And I even said, I think the word bill. Like I pictured it. Anyway. And so I gave out, there were probably at times it was grudgingly, to be honest. Just being real. It was not worshipful. It was like out of duty, you know? As I stayed faithful in that, like, my heart started to change, man. Like, I don't know what else to say. Like, I started to have a different view on money. It changed, and possessions. I had a different thought process of it. I was, in a sense, freed up. I was less stressed. I became less stressed about finances. I got to see God show up in so many amazing ways. And over time, I became more and more cheerful in my giving. And now it's fun. Like, I have fun. And it becomes like, oh, what else can I do? Oh, neat. It's exciting. Anyway. So here's a few principles that we talked about for resources. Remember, we're still going to tackle abilities. We're still going to tackle gifts. That's a shorter section. But basically, here's the thing. Use your things for the kingdom. It's pretty basic, right? Use your things for the kingdom. Grow in your cheerful giving. Grow in this. Make it worshipful. That's why we pray before the offerings, so it's an act of worship. It is. Isn't that cool? 10% is a good starting point. Gives us something. It helps us to kind of wrap our brain around it. Now here's another thing. Proverb 22:7. Look at this. It says, the borrower is slave to the lender. Remember we talked about being a nation in debt. The borrower is slave to the lender. And if you have debt, you know that this is true. And that weight, those chains can be stinking heavy. Heavy. So ultimately, living within your means is a fantastic principle to start doing. If we're going to steward God's resources, then it only makes sense to live within our means, our own abilities. Meaning we set our budget within our income. That's realistic. We don't set our budget based on what the marketing companies tell us to buy or what our neighbors have or don't have or all these different things, right? And so what has to happen invariably is we have to learn to say no to self. You're going to want things and you need to say no. I need to say no. There's things that I want to get and buy because I'm like, oh, that'd be cool. You know, and it's so easy. We could just go. We could just get the loan and we just go buy it and it's ours. Yay! You know. Got to say no to self. There's so I have a degree in marketing, and we talked about impulse buys, right? And so these impulse buys, and these stores that you go into and shop in, they are arrayed. There's people that their job is to lay out the store in such a way that you have to walk past all these different things, right? To get my bread, I got to go into the back of the store, or I get to my milk because everybody needs to go get it. So you're gonna have to walk in the back, right? There's also end cap displays where it's just a bunch of just different. Oh yeah, I might need some more batteries, right? How many guys? We bought batteries, right? And you're like, oh, well, maybe we need some. You spend an extra $20 on that. It's impulse buys, right? Or you're like, ooh, I could use these, you know. And it's like, what's the store we go to? We go to like TJ Maxx or Ross and stuff like that. And they've got these long lines, and it's like all this stuff that you're waiting in line. There's just rows of this stuff that you don't even really need. And you're walking out like, why did I buy this? You know, that I really need this. And so I use that as an illustration to show you like being able to say no to ourselves. Did you have a question? Right. Well, and kids, tell you what, the youth, and they are marketed to big time, right? They're just everything's, you know, reach all the stuff on the bottom. They can get it out and play with it. And it's like, Mom, I remember showing up, and I used to put stuff in the cart, see if my mom would end up not noticing it and buy it. Anyway. It's so easy to be selfish, right? Self-centered rather than being other-centered. It's so easy to say yes to self because it doesn't feel good in the moment. And then when you get the bill, you're like, oh, and then that weight, oh, right? The borrower is slave to the lender. We need to learn to say no to self. It's funny, right? It's funny because it's a part of it that's true, right? It's the principle of living within your means. It's the principle of saying no to self. It's the principle of, well, it's the God-given principle, really. They didn't realize it when they're creating the skit, I'm sure. All right, moving away from possessions. Okay, moving away from resources, I should say. Resources, our possessions and our cash. Now, stewarding is bigger than this. It's bigger than that. Like, God, how much more do you want then, right? Well, if everything is the Lord's, all of its fullness, everything that's in it, how much? All. And is he not worth it? Grace, peace with God, everlasting life. Grace. Did I say grace? It's so important, I'll say it twice. All right, stewarding our abilities as well. Colossians 3:23 and 24 says this, whatever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord, not to the men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance, for you serve the Lord Christ. Whatever you do, whatever you're doing, whatever job you have, whatever task you have, kids, whatever chore you're doing, school can be done as unto the Lord. You can be a student for Jesus. You should be a student for Jesus, right? We need to be employees. Ephesians chapter 5 talks about this, or 5 or 6. 5 that talks about this, right? Being our employers and employees that glorify the Lord. And so stewarding our abilities, this is our skills, our talents, and what we can do, right? Sometimes we think like it's just me mowing the lawn. What's the big deal? Well, you could do that unto the Lord. You could do such a great job that your parents are proud. You could mow the lady's door, lady who struggles to mow because she's elderly or something. You can mow her lawn for her. I mean, I'm not sure why I'm talking about this. I'm shooting from the hip, but there's different ways. If you opened your mind up to it, like saying, "Hey, Lord, these are my abilities. Can you use them?" Sometimes we think we don't have any abilities. Some of you right now are like, "Oh, I don't really have any skills." Yes, you do. You are made in the image of God. You are created with a purpose. Handmade by Him. You bear His marks. You bear God's fingerprints, and you don't have anything? Let us make man in our image, right? Your ability to create and to think and to love and to speak truth and the Word. You can share the Word. You can pray. You tell me you don't have anything. Get out of here. Oh, come on. May this stir you up to use what you have for the Lord. Whatever you do. I like that. That's pretty broad, isn't it? Hey, whatever you do. You're getting gas? Do it heartily as to the Lord. I don't know what that looks like. Maybe you see the person next to you getting gas and they're frustrated. Heck, I was going to go get gas once and there was somebody that was stressed and they didn't have money to put gas in their tank, so I put gas in their tank. You never know. You never know what's going to happen, right? I don't know. Whatever you do, whatever, do it to the Lord. Do it unto the Lord, man. Steward your abilities well. We also need to steward our gifts. Now we're talking more spiritual things. 1 Corinthians 12:1 says this, now concerning spiritual gifts, brethren, I don't want you to be ignorant. And then he goes on to explain some of the spiritual gifts in chapter 12. But we have all, if you are a born-again Christian, the promise of God is that we have at least one spiritual gift. Now, we've already covered abilities. That's different. That's kind of just your skills as being a human being. Maybe you've cultivated those skills. You can cook really well, or you can paint or you can play instruments or sing or all these different things, whatever that is. That's why it says whatever, do it unto the Lord. This is now spiritual gifts. This is like superpower, okay? For those that know me, I love superheroes. I love comics and Marvel movies. I'm a Marvel guy. I try to get in. I'm into a Batman series right now, but anyway, if anybody's DC here. So the spiritual gifts are something that is like a superpower that we have. It's like something that comes right from God, and it's meant to be used in a special way. It's not yours. By the way, none of these things are ours, remember? But this is something that's special power is put into you, essentially. It's birthed by the Holy Spirit. We're not supposed to be, and look, what's it say there? I don't want you to be ignorant of these things. What if you had a superpower and you didn't even know it, and you're ignorant of it? It means you're just unaware. Well, you could use the word unaware. I don't want you to be unaware of your ability, your superpower. Like if you had the ability to fly and you never fly, that's kind of lame. Like you find out on your deathbed, you're like, oh yeah, by the way, you could have flown this whole time. What? I had the ability to shoot coffee out of my fingertips. I don't know why that. I'd be making. Yeah. Anyway. The weirdest human power. All right, spiritual gifts, though, man, we're not supposed to be ignorant about it. Why? Because if we're ignorant of it and we don't know, we can't use it. If we're not using it, then God doesn't get glory. He's not glorified. These are superpowers to be used in the kingdom of God. Right? We'll come back here to 1 Peter 4:10. We read this earlier. As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's grace. Oh. We are to use His things for Him and to be good stewards. We need to steward also His grace. So stewarding the gifts that He's given us. If you have the spiritual gift of, say, mercy, how are you using it? If you have the gift of teaching, how are you using it? If you have the gift of, you name it, how are you using it? Well, I don't really know. I tell you what, if you have a spiritual, and you're not sure talk to me. That's literally part of my role, is to equip you for the work in the ministry. I'd love to guide you in that. And pray over you with that. There's a place for you in the kingdom to use that gift. And if you don't know what your gifts are, we need to be praying over that. We need to discover it. I don't want you to be ignorant of them. As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another, not self, serve one another as good stewards of God's grace. And so stewarding not just our spiritual gifts, but God's grace. There are so many opportunities, guys, for us to share grace with one another. Amen? By the way, grace is earned? Undeserved. There's lots of times to be able to have grace on each other. Aren't we glad that we have grace, right? That we would give grace to others. Be a good steward of the grace. God has given you grace. He's forgiven you of this. He's forgiven you of that. And it's not just the forgiveness side. Grace is much bigger than that, isn't it? He's given you other things as well. And so there's so much He's given us. Peace, joy, hope. So much, right? Think of the patience He has with us. The patience He has with us. I'm glad He's been patient with me. Now let us in turn steward God's grace to one another. Steward it. You have received His grace. Now freely give that to each other. I'm not going to do it. They need to do this. Hold on. Yes, that needs to be restored, baby. But freely give the grace. Grace is unearned. Grace is unearned, right? Be good stewards of God's grace. So stewarding God's resources that He's given us, our possessions, our money. Stewarding the abilities that He's given us. That's our talents, our skills. Okay, things we've learned along the way, we're good at, And then stewarding our gifts, spiritual gifts, as well as God's grace, for example, those types of things. Stewarding that stuff well. All of that together is what it looks like to follow Jesus in this area. Remember, we're talking about following Jesus. Jesus modeled everything we're talking about, right? As unto the Father. Following Jesus, the role of stewardship. In a nutshell, just remember this, it's all God's. The big principle, it's all His anyway. By the way, you're not taking anything with you. Nothing's going with you. You don't need it there. Heaven is way cooler than your stuff. Heaven is the fulfillment of relationships too. There's going to be a purity in that, right? Talents and abilities, right? There'll be stuff you're doing in heaven. It's going to be cool. It's exciting. It's all God's. It's all God's. You've been entrusted with His things. You're His kids. He goes, hey, I'm going to take off for a little while. I want you to have this stuff. These resources, these talents, these gifts, abilities, all those things. I want you to have these things, and I want you to use them. I'm going to come back. We'll see how you did. You've been entrusted. So now, you have a choice. Am I going to use these things for me? Or am I going to be other-centered? Am I going to look for ways to use it for others? Live within your means. That's a little thing to get out from under the chains. I'll be honest, that can take some time. But live within your means, that helps. That's a good principle. Using our resources, using our abilities, using our gifts for the Lord to follow Jesus. Amen?